So yesterday, July 23rd, Meta released the first open weights model that's at the frontier that we've ever had. And I'm going to explain what that means. So large language models are fundamentally either frontier models or not. And frontier models are cutting edge. It's what it sounds like. It's on the edge of innovation. They're the largest models. They have the best context windows. Now, an open weight model is something where you're not trying to hide the secret sauce or the recipe that enables you to generate a token when someone gives you a prompt. As I've talked about on this channel before, and many others have discussed, large language models are fundamentally about token prediction. So when they're sentence completers. When you give them an utterance, when you give them inputs as you enter questions or statements into the chatbot, they are going to then predict the correct response from their training data set. And the way they do that, the recipe they use to do that, to select the exact next token, has to do with weighting. You're weighting the model's ability to choose a particular token from the vast array of possible options that derive from the training set. And so weights are sort of like a recipe. It's like saying, we're going to take 3 eggs for the omelet instead of 2. And what happened was everyone else, Anthropic and OpenAI and everyone else in the game basically has said, we don't want to release the recipe. Here's the omelet. We're not telling you how many eggs are in the omelet. We're not telling you whether we added a dash of cumin. We're just going to cook the omelet, serve it to you, and say, please enjoy the omelet. And Meta's not saying that. Meta is saying, no, here's the whole recipe, and you can build your own omelet, right? Open your own restaurant. And what's interesting is, not only is this as good as the frontier model, so there's really no quality degradation in using an open source model, it's also something that Meta is explicitly committed to maintaining. So Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, that's now Meta, has said he wants to build an ecosystem. He wants an ecosystem built around open large language models because he thinks that's what's best for Facebook and that's what's best for society at large long term. That is a huge philosophical difference, and how that debate plays out, how the debate between Mark Zuckerberg and Sam Altman plays out over time is going to shape our future. Fundamentally, if you are in the OpenAI camp, you think that large language models should be closed and they should be something where the exact weights are not revealed. There are people who argue there are security implications to revealing the open weights because these models are so powerful. On the other hand, if you're Mark, you say, no, that's actually not how it works. I want to have an open ecosystem where everyone can build software because I think we all benefit from that. And that includes Meta, by the way. Meta will benefit, he thinks, if everyone is building in the same ecosystem and if Meta controls that ecosystem. Even if the weights are open, Meta still drives and anchors that ecosystem and enables utility across Facebook with that ecosystem and ends up becoming an anchor in the space the way Apple has become an anchor in the Mac hardware space. Like everyone can build apps for iPhone. Everyone can build apps for Mac, but Mac still runs and drives a lot of value out of that ecosystem. So I want to think about that, right? I want to talk about takeaways we can have in a world where you have a frontier model that actually has open weights. I think there's a few here. Number one, models and intelligence are a commodity. The fact that this exists at all means that intelligence costs are going to keep coming down. Now, what that means is that the people who are putting a lot of money into training the next generation model are going to need to find other ways to recoup their investment. If it just keeps getting cheaper to use these models because the frontier model is free, you're going to have to find other use cases that you can monetize that are based on intelligence to get return on investment for the billions and billions and billions of dollars you're spending. And that's a great question for Microsoft CTO this morning. I'm not sure how they're going to answer it, but that's a long-term question. Is basically, if you have closed models, you have to monetize them. If you have open models, long-term, you want to monetize them, but you believe you have a play there. Why is it different? Why is the monetization strategy between Microsoft and Meta so distinct? At the end of the day, Meta does not make money off of cloud. It's one of the only major players that doesn't. It makes money off the attention and eyeballs of consumers. It does not make money when someone purchases cloud services. Microsoft makes money off Azure when that happens. Google has a cloud product. Amazon has a cloud product. And when you have a cloud product, what you're incentivizing is consumption in the cloud. You want people to move to the cloud. You want people to use your AI services in the cloud. It makes a lot of sense for Microsoft if people are using OpenAI's services in the Azure cloud. And that's what they would like you to do. And they're building to that effect. And so part of the monetization play that they want you to have as an enterprise is they want you to think the closed model's more secure, the closed model's on a cloud install. And I actually don't think that's a terrible play, even in a world where we have freely available frontier open weight models. Corporations may still want the security and surety that comes from having another corporation committed to providing a secure environment for computing. That by itself may be the monetization play. But if that's the case, fundamentally, it means that compute and cloud are continuing to be what these big players are selling, and AI is just the use case that gets you to use more compute. Whereas for Meta, what they're really working on is how do we build an ecosystem where we can build the kinds of apps that we want to build, where others can build the kinds of apps they want to build, and ultimately we can get an AI-driven future that has Meta at the heart of it. And so it's about attention. Look, I'm not a future prognosticator. I'm not saying which one is going to win because I don't think anybody knows. And I think the future probably looks like both. But I think for individual people or entrepreneurs who are building in this space, there are some takeaways that we can derive. And I think the first is if intelligence is getting cheaper, then cheap software is going to become the norm. So we used to be in a space where, like when Mark Benioff founded Salesforce, it took a lot to compete with what he built because it took many, many developers to build the equivalent of Salesforce at the time. That's not true anymore. It is really, really easy to replicate software with minimal developers. It's getting easier all the time. And that's partly because the expertise to build that software has spread widely across a widening pool of engineering talent. And it's also partly because large language models have really accelerated coding. There are stories that are proliferating across the internet of individuals who hadn't coded before or coded just a little bit who have now built fully functioning apps. That is happening now. It may not be enterprise grade apps, but they're apps that they can sell, and it's happening now. It will happen more in the future. Software is going to get really, really cheap to build. That means unprecedented opportunity to build, but it also means unprecedented availability of software. So it's going to be noisier and noisier in the space. And so what that means is that distribution and utility are what's going to matter most. At the end of the day, if you have the ability to distribute your software, if you have the ability to drive usage with that software because of where you're positioned in the ecosystem, you have a play that nobody else has. You have an ace up your sleeve that people who are just building the software without the distribution advantage don't have. Now, second-time founders have known this for a really long time, that distribution beats everything. Having the ability to move the product beats everything. It's just going to be more true now because it's so easy and cheap to build software. That you're going to have competitors. You don't even have to Google for them. They're everywhere. You can assume that the work that you put in to build a particular feature will be copied really, really fast. And so what sustains you is your distribution advantage. And that brings me to sort of the last point I want to make here. The thing that we are missing in AI today, and the thing that Meta is trying to build with Llama 3.1, is building where everyone wants to be. Now, for Llama, that's a play for an ecosystem. They want to build an ecosystem where builders want to be. For others who are founding or building in the AI space, it's about building what people want to use. It's about building where people want to be spending their time. one of the things that distinguished Instagram during the 2010s explosion in software is that they built a product where people wanted to be. People wanted to scroll there, people wanted to create there. And we don't really have that equivalent in the consumer application space. And I would argue we also don't have it in the B2B space for AI. There is a big opportunity for a suite of applications for business. There's an opportunity for new consumer applications that basically build where people want to spend their time. And that requires using the ease with which we can build AI to build polished, delightful experiences where people really want to spend their time. I do think that the value of polish is going to continue to go up. And that comes back to sort of this idea that Linear has championed in the last year or so, where they really advocate that software in the 2020s is about polish, because a lot of the other spaces in the market have been taken. The MVP idea may be going away because it's simply so cheap to produce much better software than an MVP. We will see. But all of these conclusions around intelligence flattening, around software getting cheaper to build, around distribution, around how we build delightful experiences where people want to be, that shakes out of Mark Zuckerberg's commitment to open source frontier weight models. So it was a huge day yesterday for Llama 3.1's release. It's absolutely massive. We won't really see it play out for a few months, but that's the direction we're all headed, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. Good luck building.